All right, good afternoon. We're sorry, today's episode of the show we couldn't make it live, but I'm sure once we're done with this recorded version of the show, so we'll definitely, share it with everyone. So today on the show, we're going to be talking about introduction to Azure Data Catalog. And with me today, I have Angela Henry to do justice to the topic. Good afternoon, Angela.
Hi, Kazim. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah. So quickly, let's start with an introduction of you, Angela. So do you mind, can you help us with an introduction real quick, and then we can get started?
Sure. So I am Angela Henry. I live in High Point, North Carolina, in the United States. I am a solution architect at Blue Granite, which is mostly a BI-focused consulting group, and we focus on the Microsoft BI stack. I am a three-time data platform MVP. I do tweet and I do blog. My Twitter handle is SQL Swimmer because I'm also a swimmer, a coach, and an instructor. So that's just a little bit about me. And I've been doing IT database work for more than 20 years. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay, perfect. So let's digress a little bit now, Angela. So you mentioned you're a swimmer coach as well, right? So yes. So how do you manage to combine teaching people how to swim with IT?
Well, teaching people how to swim is it's a passion of mine. And it's something that is kind of just very near and dear to my heart. It's kind of a funny story. As a child, I was actually terrified of the water and absolutely afraid to swim. And through some help with other people, they kind of got me over that fear. It's not completely gone. But now I want to be able to share that fear, or not share the fear, but share, teaching somebody who is fearful how to swim and how to deal with that fear. And in IT, it's kind of the same thing. It's not, a lot of people are kind of afraid of computers. So I guess it kind of comes across there as well, that I want to be able to share my knowledge with somebody so that they can, have a better life, I guess.
I get it, Angela. So for you, which came first? Was it the love for swimming, the sport, or was it the love for IT?
Oh, I think oh, that's a tough one. Because I've always, so I have a degree in computational mathematics. So I've always had a love for numbers and computers and stuff. So I don't know, maybe they kind of came along at the same time.
Oh, wow. All right. Okay, Angela. So let's leave swimming now and let's talk tech, right?
Sure.
So, can you tell us what is Azure Data Catalog?
So Azure Data Catalog, let's take one step back a little bit and to talk about just what a data catalog is. Yeah. So I'm sure, and even before that, there are a couple of questions that I always ask people. How many data sources do you have in your company? Do you just have one? I'm sure there are a lot of people who can't say that they just have one. And then the next one is, do you know where all of your data sources are? Yeah. And typically the answer to both of those questions is no. So that's where a data catalog comes in. A data catalog lets you create an organized metadata about your data. So it's a catalog in the sense that it creates one location where you can find all of your information about your data sources. So with Azure Data Catalog, Azure, that's Microsoft's cloud. So it's a cloud-based data catalog that Microsoft has created, and it's all hosted up in the cloud. And you can store information about all of your data sources, whether those data sources are on-prem or whether they are in the cloud. So that is what Azure Data Catalog is. It helps store the location information about your data source, the connection information, and then you always need to add a description for that.
Okay. So I just started hearing about this service recently. So I want to ask, is this a new service up on Azure? And also before the Azure Data Catalog, what technology was used for this sort of service?
So the Azure Data Catalog has been around for a few years. It hasn't really caught on, which I don't understand why. It's still on V1. But to me, it's super important. And the reason is why, it kind of leads to your second question is, what did we use before? Well, I can tell you in other places that I've been, we have spreadsheets, we have SharePoint lists, the knowledge that is just sitting in the DBA's head or the developer's head. So none of that information was centrally located. And maybe you weren't looking at the right spreadsheet that had all of that information in there. Or you know what? Maybe your developer won the lottery and all of that information disappeared and nobody knows how to connect to that data source anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So can you still hear me, Angela?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So you know about SharePoint, I like to believe, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how does this particular service now, how does it compare to services such as BCS? BCS, we have BCS, Business Data Connectivity on SharePoint. BCS, we use BCS for surfacing external line of business data. It helps us to format, display things, and then bring in, that connect with data source now and pull all of those data, format them the way you want, and then display them within SharePoint. So how is the Azure Data Catalog, different from BCS in SharePoint?
So Azure Data Catalog doesn't actually store any of your data. It just stores the connection information. So think of it kind of as an index to where all of your data lives, but it doesn't actually store your data in Azure Data Catalog.
Okay, I get it now. So if it doesn't store our data, but is this a service that we have to pay for on Azure? Is it free service on Azure?
There are two different editions for Azure Data Catalog. There is the free edition, and with the free edition, you get up to 50 users and 5,000 data assets, or you can go with the standard. That gives you unlimited users. It gives you up to 100,000 data assets. You also get a data glossary, which comes in really handy because if you have terms that you believe are common in your organization, but maybe different departments use them slightly differently, you have that opportunity to add them to a glossary to put an exact definition so that everybody knows what you're talking about. And then also with the standard edition, you get some additional security options. So you can, and that helps with governance and access control so that you can, down at the asset level, define who can see and or discover and annotate those data assets. And the cost for standard edition is $1, it's $1 US per month per user. So there are a couple of caveats here. So first thing, there are some prerequisites to be able to create an Azure Data Catalog. And the first one is that you do have to have a Microsoft Azure subscription. So that that in and of itself, which kind of makes sense since it's an Azure Data Catalog, you're going to have an Azure subscription. And then the other thing is that you have to create your Azure Active Directory tenant. So depending on, so I myself as an MVP, part of one of the benefits of being an MVP is that I get an Azure subscription at no cost to myself. So I'm not sure what Azure subscriptions cost outside of that, but this is because my company takes care of that, so I don't have anything to do with that. But for Azure Data Catalog itself, if you want the standard edition, it's $1 per month per user.
Okay. So when I was making some findings about the service, I learned we could only create one catalog per enterprise. Is this correct?
That is correct. And I hear a lot of people groan when I say you can only have one. But if you stop and think about it, Microsoft actually did that very purposefully. And the reason behind that is the whole idea of having a catalog is so that everything is in one place. So if you start allowing multiple catalogs, how do you know which catalog you need to go to find the information about your data source?
Okay, but what do you think in terms of performance bottleneck now? So don't you think once we begin to have huge amount of data, in this catalog, that we can begin to notice some sort of degradation in performance?
So again, we're not storing the actual data from your data sources in the data catalog.
Okay.
We are only storing metadata about your data. So, so if like we're talking specifically like a SQL Server database, we're going to talk about it's going to store the server name. It's going to store the type of data source that it is, which would be SQL Server, and then it's going to store a description. So it's only metadata, so it's not the actual data itself that is in the catalog. I have, for my own personal use, I have created, I have several thousand data assets already in my my personal data catalog, and I have not seen any performance issues at all. Because we're not talking about a whole lot of data.
Okay, I get it now. So for businesses looking to take advantage of this, the Azure Data Catalog, what kind of skills should they be looking for? Or is it something that anyone can just choose to take on? What's your take on this?
So how I see Azure Data Catalog is it's a resource in that it's only going to help anybody in your company discover data. So if you want to discover, if somebody comes to you and asks you to build a report about your sales information, but they also want you to fold in budget and forecast information, do you know where to go to get all of that information?
Okay.
So if you don't, that's where Azure Data Catalog comes in. And Azure Data Catalog is actually very searchable. So you can search for these kinds of information, the metadata about your data assets. And it comes in super handy. So, people like your data developers and your BI and your analytics professionals. So these are the people who are responsible for actually producing that data and the content for other people to consume. So they should definitely be using it. And then you have people, your data stewards. Those are the people who have the knowledge about the data and what the data means and how it's intended to be used. So they should definitely be using Azure Data Catalog. And then you have your data consumers. Those are the people who just need access to the data on a daily basis, just to be able to do their job. Whether that's writing a report or whatever. With whatever tool they choose to use. And then you also have like central IT users. So, your main IT department for disaster recovery purposes, what happens in a disaster recovery, if you, if your data center goes down, if your central IT department doesn't know about your data source, it probably is not going to come back online when they're bringing everything back.
Okay.
So, everybody needs to know about Azure Data Catalog, and those are the reasons why those particular audiences should be using it.
Okay. Okay. So, what would you say is the future for Azure Data Catalog? Considering the fact that right now is not a very popular service.
So I've had a lot of people ask about this, and I think the biggest hurdle is kind of getting management to buy into Azure Data Catalog. It has to be a top-down effort, because once that example is set that yes, we want to use Azure Data Catalog, it becomes an invaluable resource. But it can only become an invaluable resource if it kind of starts at the top of the company, and kind of upper management realizes the value add that it brings to the company. And some suggestions I have for that is to start small. So if you have a process in place for current projects or whatever, start with a small project and integrate Azure Data Catalog into that process in small chunks, and just make that part of your process whenever you're working on a project, and people will begin to use it and they will begin to rely on it. And it's in the cloud, and it's hosted in the Azure data centers. So they use geo-replication to make sure that it doesn't go down. You've got almost 100% uptime. So that's kind of where I see that going.
Okay. Okay. So, do you think that we can have any form of integration, between the Azure Data Catalog now and the Power Platform suite of products? Can you have any form of synergy between those two?
So you can actually use, they have a REST API for Azure Data Catalog. So if you want to be able to do mass updates or programmatically add your data sources or update your data source metadata, you can do it that way. But there's not a real big integration at this point with any of the Power Platforms. So, nothing to integrate with Power BI or Power Apps at this point. But if they've got the REST API, so if you want to build your own application that sits on top of the Azure Data Catalog, you can do that just like you can with Power BI, so that you can have that integrated into your own applications.
Okay, very well said then. So now, Angela, do you mind to walk us through a quick demo that can help us connect the dots with all of these things we've talked about?
Sure. So I have a demo. Bear with me for a quick second. I got to get the right screen up.
That's fine.
Do that. Bring this over here. All right, so I have a demo catalog that I have created when I talk about this. So, oops, I've signed into the wrong account. So bear with me for a second. That's the problem when you have multiple accounts. You have to, with Microsoft, you have to make sure you use the right one. Yeah. Taking a little. So yesterday was Patch Tuesday, so all of the patches came out. So, everything is taking forever this morning. So let me go ahead and see if it's going to allow me to choose which screen. There it is. let's share that one. All right, is it sharing? Can you see my
Yes,
screen?
it's very well
All right.
visible.
So I have here, I've got my SQL Swimmer data assets. And how I got here is I went to the portal, just portal.azure.com, and I've got my catalog right here. And mine is just called catalog. Here's another little quick thing. If you have an Office 365, or I guess it's now called Microsoft 365 subscription, that includes a Power BI Pro license, you automatically have a data catalog included with that subscription at no additional cost to you. But you can't change the name of it. It's just called catalog. So it's not super friendly, but that's what it is. So that's why mine is called catalog. So the best way to do it is if you start from your portal dashboard, navigate to that, and it'll pop up, and over on the right hand side it says the Azure Data Catalog portal, and the link for that is just www.azuredatacatalog.com. If you click on that link, it will pop up over here. Now if you had not already logged in, it would prompt you for your credentials, and this is what it looks like. This is your home screen. You can search your data catalog here. You can publish. This is a little bit confusing, the terminology, because you're not actually publishing your data to Azure Data Catalog. You are publishing the metadata about your data source to the Azure Data Catalog. I really wish they would use a different term there, because it is very confusing and kind of distressing to a lot of people. I talked about the glossary, so I have a standard edition here. So one of the things that, being a swimmer, I was messing around with the glossary here, and there are different types of courses when you talk about swimming. So I created a term in my glossary called course, and the definition, I was able to supply all of that as well. So, something kind of simple. And then there are settings. So you can go into the settings screen, and it will specify, see, I've got my standard edition, the different security groups. Because I'm using the standard edition, I have that additional option. All of my catalog users, my glossary administrators, my catalog administrators, and you can actually change the title of the portal as well. So even though my catalog is called catalog, which is not helpful at all, I can give it a friendly title so that it displays as SQL Swimmer data assets and not just catalog. And then you also have the ability to downgrade your catalog if you want to. So I have a standard edition. If I wanted to take it back down to a free, I could do that right here in the settings. So if we come back over here to our home page in the data catalog portal, you can see that it lists your assets. You have several different ways that you can view your assets. It tells you the top tags that you've got, how many assets are in here, how many are annotated, how many users and publishers. But the really cool thing is that you can pin assets. So if there are things that you look at all the time, so I'm just going to pull up this, and it's my community activity database. And when I pull it in here, we now see some additional information about this data asset. I've given it a friendly name. It's my community tracker database. I've given it a description. You can specify who the experts are. You can add additional tags, just like best practice with all things Azure, you can add tags. It gives you all of the connection information. So there's my server name, the name of the database, how you would request access to this. And this is an editable field. If you need to figure out how to connect to this data source via any of these other connection strings, it gives you the format for those connection strings. And I don't know about you, but I can never, ever remember JDBC connection strings. So to me, this is like super, super helpful. You'll also note that, it lists the format of the string, but it doesn't actually preserve the credentials that you have used to create this. So your information is secure by default. It will not store those passwords anywhere in plain text for anybody to see how it's actually connecting. It just gives you the format on how to create those strings. And you can take ownership. You have this really great, and this is something that drives me crazy about, there we go. The rendering, when it's not in a full screen, sometimes looks a little funky, but you have this rich text formatting that you can use in all of your documentation tabs. So that's super helpful. You can also drill down into that asset and you can see that there's all of the kind of the summary information and that it's got 3 tables in here. Here are every single one of my tables. So I can actually drill down into every aspect of this. And now, because we're looking at the attribute level of these assets, we have some additional tabs that are available for it. So they do have an option to include a preview of your data. If you decide to use that preview, it only selects the top 20 records. So if you are under strict guidelines on not being able to have your data leave a certain geographic area, you may need to turn that off. Or if it's PPI or PHI or any of those types of data, it's turned off by default. You have to actually purposefully turn on the preview of your data. My data is not proprietary or super secret in any way, shape, or form. So I included a preview. So I've only got 20 records in here. You can see all of the different columns with their data types. You can add specific tags. And again, descriptions for everything. You can also profile the data that's in those individual tables. So this comes in super handy. So you can get your summary statistics. You've got your min, your max, your average, your standard deviation, your null counts, distinct counts. The only thing I don't really like is that, not that I don't like, but I think that they could improve upon is when you're looking at profile information for character data. So you'll notice like my title of presentation, it's character data, but the minimum and the maximum, they don't really make sense in this context. What would make more sense is to say, the minimum length of a title, the average length of a title, the maximum length of a title. But that's neither here nor there. At least we get something. Again, you have that great documentation tab. You can create these tables in here. So if you're not able to include a preview of your data, you can kind of mock up dummy data so people would know what it should look like in your documentation tab. And then the last thing that I think is super cool is this related data tab. If you have foreign keys set up in your database, the discovery tool that you use will find those, and it will actually say, hey, this table is related to this other table, and this is the column that they are related on. So that to me is worth the price alone, so that you can figure out how stuff is related to each other. So that's my kind of really quick run through of Azure Data Catalog. Is there anything specific you want to see?
This is fine. This is fine. Just
Okay.
for people to be able to connect the dots with this, see how easy it is to set up. It's good knowing that it's not rocket science, to set this up now.
It is not.
So we would have been able to take live questions now, but since we have to do this offline, so it's just myself and you and Oiza now. So I'm not sure if Oiza has any, Oiza, do you have any questions you would like to ask Angela?
Brian. Hi, cousin. You can hear me yet? Just hold on 1 second. Oh.
Okay, it's fine now. Okay, Angela, while we're waiting for a question to come through, for those that would be watching this video, at a later time now, are there go-to place? What would be your recommended go-to place for resources for them if they would like to learn more about this?
Microsoft actually did a really good job on creating documentation for Azure Data Catalog. Let me find the links. I have a whole slide deck that talks about Azure Data Catalog and all of that. So I can share that with you, that it has those specific links in it.
Okay. That will be fine then. That will be fine. And do you know if there's any exam or Microsoft is working towards an exam for this in the future?
Not that I have heard. Microsoft has become kind of a more kinder, gentler Microsoft than they have in years past. They're using Git as their source control and GitHub so that people can do pull requests and whatnot. And Microsoft is more receptive to community feedback. And they are moving at a much quicker rate of change when it comes to their products. So even though this is a V1 product, I have high hopes that they will invest more in this. I think Power BI has kind of stole the sun from all the products at Microsoft the last 5 years. So right now it's a little bit in the shade, but I think it's really going to come to light.
Okay.
And it will shine.
Yes. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, Angela, for coming on the show today. And sorry about the little bit of technical glitch earlier on. Hope you won't mind if I send another invite. Maybe we'll try to do something live again on, say, let's call it Power BI. I know you do a lot of Power BI yourself, right?
I do, yes.
Okay, so hopefully in the future, I'll try to send an invite again for a live Power BI webinar with you.
Oh, that would be wonderful. And thank you so much for having me on your show. And it wouldn't be a tech talk if we didn't have technical difficulties. So
yes.
So I really appreciate your patience and your persistence while we got those worked out.
Yes, thank you so much, Angela. And we'll do this again next week. Thank you. Well, there's nobody listening right now except myself and you, Anaiza. So thank you so much again, and bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Kazim.
Okay, bye-bye, Angela. Continue to keep